Mid-2671, arm of Gilora. Champion Tukari continued. At her request, Karu played the call for help via the large holodisplay in the center of her bridge. This is Captain Alrus Bohr, and my ship is under attack by pirates masking themselves as porters. Assist me, and I will ensure you are well paid. The video was of a large man with overlapping skin, with a set of long tusks that protruded from his upper jaw. Behind him, gunfire erupted between his security and an unknown force from behind that she couldn't see before the video began to loop. "How long until we can assist?" she questioned, resting upon her seat with a conquering aura. "The trip is short, and it's 2 systems away, so approximately a couple of hours. But it seems like he's holding out." "Oh? How so?" she said with curiosity in her eyes. "Well, his signal was sent everywhere, including the life status of his crew. Seems like they boosted security after the initial string of attacks. Most of his forces seem to be at a stand still, and from the looks of it, might allow us to secure the enemy as well." This felt like the kind of break in her investigation that she needed, and awaited eagerly, wondering if the ship can go even faster between systems. The fact that it was only a couple of hours between 2 systems was already an improvement, but she still felt like they were slow compared to their ghost of an enemy. Once they reached the edge of the system, the space around their ships grew disfigured. They began their jump to the next system, and to the origin of the request that could offer insight to the plague that inhabited her home. It wasn't long before they arrived to the source of the distress signal, by the name of Alrus Bohr. She thought that if she could ensure his survival, and perhaps even capture the assailants, then she might be able to speak with the leader of the Porters Guild. An option she couldn't consider earlier on simply because she had no leverage. Nearing approach vector. "Tukari, I suggest we let some of the pups lead the charge. It'll be good experience for them," spoke Karu. The comment itself displeased her, simply for the fact that he was proposing she hold back and watch from afar, something that she rarely did. She loved fighting beside her comrades in arms, and found it unnecessary to stay behind when she was already granted a bridge commander who did just that. For what reason? Should I not lead them? To exemplify what a true warrior should appear as. By no means am I questioning your authority, Tukari, but I think now would be a good opportunity to show individuality and critical thinking among the troops. It would do well if they can learn early on to rely on each other, and not of their commanders. Karu made a fair point, and she acknowledged it, albeit reluctantly. "Very well. If you say so," she replied, turning her attention to those who resided in the hangar, awaiting their orders. "Kutaru, gather 10 of our newest warriors, preferably pups, to lead their first charge and secure that ship." "By your will, champion," he replied, promptly ceasing communication. She then returned her attention to the bridge, where Niji and Karu continued their work in silence, with Niji making demands of the countless Yunni who littered the room. However, she found one that proved to be particularly attached to him. "Say, Niji, since when did that Yunni grow so attached to you?" "Even when we boarded for the first time, they were there." He turned, caught off guard by her sudden inquiry. "Huh? Oh, you mean Tokti? I found her as a stowaway during the transport of this ship before we reached you. She was still a hatchling, but my, do they grow fast?" She was caught off guard by the sex of the Yunni in question, which was that it was female. "Isn't that dangerous?" "As far as I can see, the rest of the ship is filled to the brim with male Yunni, who would want nothing more than to mate with the lone female." "Oh, you needn't worry about that, my lady. I have procured a pheromone collar to mask her own. As far as they are aware, she is one of them, like a brother," he answered. Takti was differently hued than the others, taking a more rose-gold-colored shine to her carapace that made her stand out from the rest of the drones aboard her ship. But Tukari left it at that, as long as no one got hurt or caused a mess. Takari, looks like the first team is on their way to dock with the Toscan ship, spoke Karoo as he informed her of the status of the mission. And what of the enemy? Can we target their ship if they try to escape? She asked, eager to capture the enemy, but his reply betrayed her expectations. About that, it seems they had left moments before we arrived in system. However, Alrus lives, and is requesting your presence aboard his ship. She didn't like what this meant, whether she did a good job or utterly failed. She then made her way to the hangar at his behest, boarding a shuttle and making her way to one of the many airlocks that were available on a Toscan cargo ship. When the shuttle rocked from its docking maneuver, the doors to the rear of her shuttle opened and she was met by Kutaru and several of the Toscan security guards, along with the man who requested her, Alrus Bohr. Took you long enough, champion. Come, I believe I have some information that may benefit you on your hunt for these dreaded pirates. She stayed silent, opting to follow his lead as he led her through the corridors to their bridge. Along their way, plasma burn marks littered the walls, with many of his guards having already gone to the afterlife. She cared little for the Toscans, but offered sympathies regardless. I apologize we could not arrive sooner, but we are limited in travel. Bah! No need to apologize. I don't blame you for the lack of Kiralan ingenuity. It's a shame you don't have the new drives, he said with a sneer. She could sense that Niji wanted to rebuke the claim, but was stopped by Karu from assaulting her ears needlessly. New drives, she said questionably. Oh, you haven't heard? Well, it's all a rumor. But talks have gone around the guild of a new jump drive, one capable of bypassing multiple systems in one jump. If we could get that kind of tech, then we wouldn't need to use such archaic routes, he said with a haughty laugh. It was then that on their travel, they passed by a glass pane that lined the length of a corridor they had just turned onto that faced the interior of the ship. The space was dark and dreary and took the space of at least 2 levels of vertical space. If she had to guess, it would have best been used to house the largest of exotic animals. Instead, a small population of Celians were littered about the floor in nothing but the clothes they wore, none of which looked like they could fight, so they sat there hopelessly, with what seemed to be their only escape to have vanished. I see you only have Celians, why not Terran? She asked, as they passed the glass viewing. Oh, well. What? Were you not in process of carrying Terran slaves? She clarified, to which he waved his hand dismissively. They are a rare commodity, and only if you were contracted at the time of their war did you get your hands on some. Several million, in fact, but compared to the population of the Union, they would be worth a large fortune. I know of some who took a few for themselves. Like who? She asked. Oh, several names come to mind, but it's not my place to disclose such information. Unfortunately, I was only carrying Celians, but half of them were taken by those pirates. That's at least half of potential profit gone, he said angrily. As they entered the bridge, the guards who accompanied them left, leaving Kutaru the only other as her escort, with the pups from earlier revealed to be patrolling the ship for any hideaways. Luckily, I can still make enough to pay for expenses with some for extra, mumbled Alrus, as he took his seat at the center of the bridge, turning to the 2 Vixen behind him. Now, it's unfortunate you couldn't catch those responsible, but they killed enough of my men to not terribly impact my expenses. But still, I think you would like to see this. He pressed a button on his seat that turned on a monitor closest to him and turned it towards his guests. It was from an internal view of a camera that watched many of the entries into the ship, as well as the corridors that watched the entry into the central holding compartment. Like what she had seen from the compound weeks earlier, a blinding explosion was the start of the attack, followed by several similarly suited individuals, each sporting armor that seemed too large for their frames, except for one. And with the visual fidelity of Ulrus's video feed, she was able to clearly discern the enemy's outfit. They wore a black and grey undersuit with familiar armor upon their chest, shoulders, and thigh, along with their staple red sash worn at the waist. But the only difference was the painted additions on the chest armor and helmet. Upon the chest, a white skull was visible with a red jagged crown atop it, and the script of Odia Oz beneath it. On the head, a spread bird of prey in blue was painted that crept onto the right-hand side of the head. Of the fighters who entered, they were the one she was most wary of. "I've seen many Cellen troops, but none have I seen been donned like that," spoke Alrus. "They're a tad smaller, but those hips must be female. To think a female Cellian bested my crew and stole half my cargo. I hope you can make something of this, champion." With clarity, she had a better idea of what to look out for. But even then, their description was vastly different from what one of the survivors of Jumaru's crew depicted. As she thought upon this, Kutaru added a comment of his own. "Then this means we have two factions assaulting our borders. Perhaps we should call upon one of your brother champions for assistance." "I refuse!" she barked in stern retaliation. "I will not allow for them to steal this achievement from me." They boasted a larger fleet and force that could easily sweep through these systems in no time. But she refused to allow them the opportunity. This was her mission, and her mission alone to accomplish. One given to her by the great Neela, and whose honor she would not stain were she to ask for help. She was filled with the pride of it all, to let her mother know that she was worthy of great tasks. And fulfilling this one might even grant her a larger fleet and legion forces to call her own. Perhaps then she could fulfill her dream of being a den mother of a system all her own, all for the service of the mistress. Kutaru sensed her displeasure, recanting his earlier statement. "Forgive me, Champion Tukari. I overstepped." She ignored him, turning her eyes to Alrus. "We have seen this warrior before, and like you have guessed, she is female, but boasts a skill well beyond many Cellian troopers seen 20 cycles ago. She goes by the name of Alexandria. It is foreign in nature and unlike traditional Cellian names. To further our investigation, we would like to speak with the leader of the Porters Guild," stated Takari. "And what is in it for me? As you see, I'm down half my cargo, so unless you can procure me enough to fill my stores, then perhaps—" Before he could finish, Tukari interjected with a fierceness that caused Alrus to cower in his seat. "Perhaps what? You are lucky you got away with your lives. I have seen firsthand what this warrior is capable, and the fact you and your crew live is simply due to the increased security and lack of forces. But let me add, there exists another threat that plagued these lands that would have stopped at nothing to reduce your lives to ash." What do you speak of? Are there more to these pirates?" "There are another set of warriors unlike those who attacked your ship, and unlike these pirates who let you live, they would have gone for your entire crew. I say you got lucky, seeing how my fleet is now your protector. So we can leave and be on our way, leaving you to their eventual mercy, or we can escort you to the guild with safe passage. So what will it be, Alrus?" She let no words of his to reciprocate, taking the direction of the negotiation entirely under her control, by way of fear-mongering. It proved effective, seeing that Alrus easily faltered to her demands, but played it off as if he were already on board. "Oh, of course. We wouldn't have it any other way. Please, care to accompany me on this expedition? With you aboard, I'm sure we won't have much issue with these pirates." Pleased with his decision, Tukari then took a seat on one of the available chairs, with Kutaru taking to her side in silence for the duration of the ride. As if looking for approval, Alrus turned to the silent Tukari, who simply nodded. Then set a course for Baktara system. "Contact Grellus Brine of our new friends," he said as the ship began its stages of inter-system travel, enveloping the ship in a swirl of colors. They left no trace of where they once were, or so they had thought. When they arrived, they had expected a planet, or at least a station. But what they were met with was a collection of interconnected asteroids. Flexible cables ran through the largest of asteroids, large enough for a decent number of people to pass through to separate parts of the station. "What is this?" Tukari was the first to speak, enamored by the engineering dedicated to its upkeep. Welcome to the Porters Guild, the largest trade hub this side of the Union Arm. Countless ships of Toscan Meg zipped by in the distance, with most now aware of their presence. They maintained formation as they passed through the network of tubes and cables until Alrus's bridge was hailed from what seemed to be the central docking station. "Alrus, you fool! What are Union ships doing here?" said the voice, anger steeped in every syllable. "Pleasure to be back, Grellis. Don't worry, they're not here for us," he replied, to which Tukari interjected with a greeting of her own. "Greetings, Grellis. I am Champion Tukari, daughter of Neela, and I request an audience." There was silence at first, but a reluctant sigh sounded from the station. They had conceded. "As you wish. You will dock in Port 9, but only Alrus and his ship. The rest of your escort will have to stay." She nodded to his demands, and the call was cut, leaving the bridge in silence as docking procedures were enabled, which overall was a smooth experience. When it was complete, they all departed for the main access door located on the lower level of his ship, as well as the entrance into the central cargo space. When all assembled, Alrus and his crew began preparation of rounding up what cargo he had left, while Tukari and her accompaniment stood by as they were led out into the central staging area just before the airlocks. There wasn't as many as she expected there to be, as the space they took still offered enough room for the entirety of the ship to gather. But as the doors to the airlock opened, the Celian slaves were guided by all of Alrus's crew, where they were led to an area dedicated to similar cargo. Upon leaving the ship, her nostrils were assaulted by a stale and grimy air, something that was shared among the rest of her team and noticed by their escort. "Oh, you can smell that? Apologies, but to us it smells like home," he said with an air of reminiscence. She then turned to her group of young warriors, causing them to stop mid-step. "You all wait here for a shuttle. We'll call if we need assistance," she ordered, to which they obeyed. "Good choice," spoke Alrus. "You would have made it hard for Grellis to listen to you if you brought them." "This one should be fine, though," he said, eyeing the wary Kutaru. "Then you'd best lead on," she said with a cold and heavy tone. As they walked, they had passed what she would call a depraved society as she noted the gloomy atmosphere the dejected slaves gave off. Then again, she found their environment to be mostly at fault for their countenance and overall mentality. They were glared at as they passed, and even she could sense their hostility, but in the end paid it no mind, for they had lost their right to be angry. "Alrus, I don't take kindly to unruly slaves, especially that one." She pointed to a short-haired Celian with clipped ears, wearing nothing but rags. It was with a simple whistle to an overseer that Alrus had ordered her punishment. It was with a long rope with knotted bristles at the end connected to a handle that they swung at the slave, causing her to scream out in pain, and the authority of the overseer rang out. "That is a champion of the Union, wretch! Cease your gaze!" He struck once more, causing the Celian to collapse from the pain, and was subsequently dragged away by some guards. "My, to think you had in you the makings of a master. Are you sure you don't want to purchase from our inventory?" he beckoned, but she only replied with a shake of her head to the sides. "Unfortunately, your inventory seems far too common for my tastes. Perhaps some other time," she said candidly. When he was several more feet away, just out of earshot, Kutaru spoke to her in a hushed and subtle tone. "My lady, was that necessary?" he asked, to which they kept her demeanor as she replied in a similar tone. "Just play along," she returned, causing him to fall behind her at a lowered pace. After traversing through what seemed to be the slums of the station, they were met with better than average living spaces and scenery compared to below. A man wielding a cane to support his weight awaited them in a grandiose courtyard, which was fit with a working water fountain, adding to his prestige as one of the largest guildmasters in the Galactic Union, Grellis Brine.